Hi, everybody. Andrew Champagne alongside JD Fox for this week's edition of Champagne and JD. If you're a first-time viewer, first of all, welcome. Thank you very much for spending part of your Thursday night, Friday, Saturday, whenever with us here on Champagne and JD. If you like what we do, go on ahead and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our updates. We were off last week. We're back this week as we start gearing up not just for the Belmont Stakes in early June, but some of the other things coming up down the line. Big announcement today about Saratoga, JD. Pretty stoked about that. And I got to tell you, judging by what you're seeing down on the bottom of the screen, our guest this week, pretty stoked about that as well. He needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway because that's just the kind of guy I am. And because when I saw this guy and read up on his background, I knew we had to have him on the show. He's a native of upstate New York. He got into horse racing at a very young age. He's incredibly informed, incredibly smart, knows the game up and down, a very good handicapper, and someone who is passionate about telling stories within the game. No, I did not go back in time and find some way to bizarrely clone myself, nor am I talking about myself. I am referring to the host of Shedrow Stories, someone who does a lot of work with Amplify. Joe Mason is with us this week. Joe, welcome to the show, man.
Honor and a privilege, guys. That was quite the intro, Andrew. I really appreciate it. I'm just doing the best I can to promote the game, and we'll just do my part.
Hey, that's all we can ask for, right? And that's the duty of any racing fan to someone that's been around the game for a while, especially now when the only time racing seems to get national press is when weird stuff happens. We need to do what we can to grow the game however we can. And you've done a lot of really cool stuff that we're looking forward to talking about. We'll also take a look at the late pick 4 at Belmont Park. Before we go any further, yes, we know it is likely to rain at some point Friday and Saturday. JD's ticket takes that into account. As always, he is assuming the worst. Joe and I, however, are assuming that the races involved will stay on the turf. For me personally, it's just because Belmont dries out really, really fast, and I'm optimistic. It might not be firm turf. It might not be a fast main track, but fingers, toes, and eyes all crossed, we stay on the turf Saturday at Belmont Park because, JD, really quick before we get in, Saturday's card at Belmont is really good.
Yes, but I will give the caveat, and the reason why I'm predicting predicting chaos and the worst, and you're also eligibles and main track onlys getting in is they're going to be super cautious with that turf course with the biggest week of racing to come next weekend at Belmont for the year. So I'm taking that approach, and I've also seen the forecast. So fingers, toes crossed. Obviously, tickets will change if we get washout. I'm just going to talk about the horses because we've got to let people know about the also eligibles and the MTOs that could factor in to the sequence on Saturday. But I feel like I need to intro this segment because we have something called a youth movement in racing that I want to talk about real quick.
And as the oldest one of us, you're clearly the person in charge of this.
Well, that's what I was saying. As the 38 years young member of this podcast. I'm still considered young for horse racing, but I really want to touch on a lot of what Amplify has been doing really is about education. And I think part of that, and not to put words in your mouth, Joe, is to get kind of the youth involved. And obviously as a younger generation than myself, who's involved heavily in horse racing, kind of want to get your thoughts on how that's been going, because obviously it's the big challenge as our horse racing sport is often tagged line that it's for the octogenarians of life, but we really are seeing some things that are breathing some new life into it.
No, exactly. Yeah, JD, you hit the nail right on the head. And for us as a sport, we're often dubbed as an old man sport. A lot of elderly people are involved in the sport, but there's a variety of ways we can, promote our game. And it's unfortunate that there's so many negative headlines in the past 5 years or so, but we can get around those. Those are some obviously important things, but, just college days and stuff like that to kind of get the young people out and provide different opportunities, educational opportunities like Amplify does. And I mean, the possibilities are really endless when it comes to that, but, we'll just have to wait and see on those.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, we're talking about events that could potentially bring people out to the racetrack. Of course, the pandemic sort of put a pause on that. But going back to one of the things that you mentioned about college days, I was working as a reporter at Saratoga in the early 2010s, back when they first kicked the tires. on college day. First college day they had, the atmosphere in the backyard was pretty darn cool. And don't tell me that those people didn't contribute to handle. Maybe it wasn't necessarily as much as some of the old farts would like, but they learned a little bit while they were there. They were given prizes and scholarships for being in attendance. It was a really cool thing. And there's so much that we can still do that can still engage the public without insulting their intelligence. And that's one of the things that I think Amplify does a great job of. Because look, we're not going to name names on this outlet. It's not what we do. But there's a lot out there that tries to get fans in the door, and it comes off really insulting and really patronizing. Amplify does not do that. Amplify does a really nice job respecting the people they're trying to approach. And as somebody who makes a living in marketing, that's something you need to do.
Oh, exactly. And Anis Montplaisir, Madison Scott, can't say enough about them. And joining the Amplify team in January of 2021 this year. And it's been a true joy to produce their podcast and be a host and do all the various things I do for them. And it's really been a joy. And I'm so glad that Anis kind of took me under a wing and said, Joe, let's do this thing and let's promote all the good in the industry and get young people involved.
Yeah, and I want to mention that this week's podcast that dropped was getting college age people involved in a different manner, talking about internships that are available all throughout the country at both things closer to the track, things closer to the farm, and also some of the kind of new media, social media aspects of the game. So there's lots of places. It's not just at the track. There's lots of places for young people to get involved in the sport.
There's a variety of ways. I mean, you think of the backside, not necessarily directly on track, but some stuff off track. And I mean, there's a variety of ways you can get young people involved. It's just about kind of sifting out the negative headlines and trying to really promote the good in the game, the people on the backside that work 12 plus hours a day with these horses all the time. And I think that that's one of our biggest issues, why young people aren't necessarily as attracted to this game as football or baseball or hockey or other sports, because there's so many negative headlines lately. And we just really need to kind of, show these individuals, these young people around my age, younger or slightly older, that there is good in this game. And it's not necessarily a bad sport to get involved with, because there's good in it as well.
That's for sure. And that provides a valuable service, because to outsiders, it can look like there's a big old barrier in front of horse racing, and like it's very, very difficult to do things that are in this game. Look at what sprung up during the pandemic. Anybody that has an opinion about horse racing has a podcast, and we'll get to yours in a little bit. But the thing that Amplify does, and in this particular instance they did really well, is they showed, look, there's a lot of different ways to get involved in the game, and some of them might be seen as outside the box, but you can go down these paths and have a really big impact doing stuff you love doing.
Yeah, for me, it's, podcasting or getting the word out in new media. And for me, I'm just so fortunate that they gave me the opportunity to kind of spearhead this initiative and, do my part. And, it's really anything you want to do in the sport, whether it's hands-on with the horses, media, photography, being a casual fan and, just meeting somebody at the track one day and getting involved that way. I mean, it's not a sport that, in my eyes, a lot of people that are involved in our sport have a family connection, whether their father was a trainer, their mother was an exercise rider, whatever it may be. But in today's networking age of social media and everything, there's more opportunities to kind of get yourself out there like I have. And I think that's, it's intimidating for young people, don't get me wrong, but, overall, the community is very supportive and very welcoming. And it's just kind of getting yourself out there. That's really what starts it all.
Yeah, and that's as good a segue. JD, I'm sorry, you came in a little bit late. I don't want to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, I was just going to do the exact same thing that you were doing. We're just going to segue into Joe's podcast. So go ahead, Andrew.
Okay, so, well, that is as good a segue as any into talking about Shedrow Stories. And this is how I first came to, see the stuff that you were doing, because over the past year or so, you've started the podcast. It is called Shedrow Stories. Really quick, where can people listen to it?
Anywhere you get your podcast, Andrew, really anywhere, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, anywhere you get your podcast, pretty much.
Needed to make sure we got the word out about that before we started going in, but I discovered the show, discovered it was hosted by someone from my old neck of the woods in upstate New York. And then I'm seeing the lineup of guests, and I'm going, whoa, that's a really good series of guests that you have. It's really freaking cool the way that you've dove in and established yourself with this show in having a lineup of guests that is up there with a very select group of podcasts like, I don't know. JD, you know any other podcasts that have a really good group of guests with a library and an easily accessible place?
I believe In the Money Media makes a whole bunch. I'm kidding.
Hi, Pete Fornatel. How you doing? At any rate, though, kidding aside and mild ego trip aside, you've got a heck of a lineup and you've done a heck of a job. How did this podcast come about? What was the process like in terms of getting it started?
Well, I appreciate the compliments, guys. I mean, it was an uphill battle from the start because during the pandemic, I was sent home from college, SUNY Adirondack, where I just graduated with an associate's. Patted myself on the back there. But it was difficult. I'm not going to lie. It was a uphill battle, as I said. I was shipped home in March of last year because of the pandemic. I couldn't, see any of my college friends or any racing people. So I said, how can I get involved and share the stories of people on the front side, back side, and everywhere in between? So I said, podcast. You don't necessarily have to have somebody right with you. You could do it virtually, like Zencaster or StreamYard, like we're doing right now. And that's kind of how it started. And from there, 55 episodes. I can't even believe it. I mean, it's remarkable.
Yeah, that's for sure. It's not an easy thing to do, and take it from a couple of people who started this for a lot of similar reasons, right? We did this to try to give people something to be excited about on a weekly basis. And also because, let's be real, JD and I were starting to go a little bit stir crazy last March.
But the important thing real quick while we're on it, Joe, you mentioned you're at episode 55. Well, this is episode 56 of Champagne and JD. So there you go.
Don't rub it in, guys. What did I do?
In fairness, I'm not
just trying to be a nice guy. Come on.
He's the one rubbing it in. And yes, I pointed the right direction. Even after 56 episodes of doing this, anytime I try to point, I have no freaking idea where I'm going. It's a running joke.
And I think, getting back into serious topics, Joe, I mean, you've had a lot of people on that people may not have thought of immediately for a podcast or have done a lot of podcasts. And then you're like, oh, man, this is great. Like Barbara Livingston. I mean, that is such a great get. And that was such a cool podcast to listen to.
She was a joy. I mean, it was like I was talking to an old friend. I'd never met her before. I'd seen her around the track. But to be honest, I was intimidated to, talk to her because she's such a legend of the sport and she knows what she's doing and Eclipse Awards and all. And I'm like, what do I do? So I did as much research as I could, just like every other episode. And it couldn't have gone any better. I mean, it was like, as I said, talking to an old friend because she's so knowledgeable and knows what she's talking about.
Yeah, I can attest. Barbara's a wonderful human being, has done a lot right by me. And she's delightful. And she's one of the best in the world at what she does. That's for darn sure. It's a really cool thing that you've been doing because you're going to college. What was your major at SUNY Adirondack?
Radio, television, broadcasting.
Gee, what a coincidence. Well, you're doing this stuff. And in addition to being a college student and taking the classes to do this stuff, you're getting hands-on learning. That's the reason I went where I went. And that type of experience, it's invaluable. What are some of the things that you've learned as you've gone around doing this for a little over a year with those 55 episodes to where you can go back and, 10, 20 years on when maybe you're doing other stuff on big stages, because trust me, you will. And what are some of the things that you'll look back on and say, oh, this really helped as far as teaching me how to do X, Y, and Z?
Well, that's a tough question to answer because we've all learned so much over the past year with the pandemic, learned about ourselves, learned about people we know. So for me, I think it's just the editing process and kind of getting the necessary materials to start a podcast because, people want to start podcasts all the time, but they don't know what equipment to get and whatever. So right next to me, I don't think you can see it. It's off camera. I have my blue Snowball, so I got one of those. I got a mic stand and, editing software and all that good stuff. So really just kind of getting the necessary tools to start a podcast and edit it and successfully do it with intro music and make it as professional as possible.
Yeah, no, and that's something that you kind of get a background for doing if you come from a journalism program and a hands-on radio television program like myself and Andrew came from. And obviously, I'm using the words hands-on because you had a slightly different experience in getting your associates recently. So I'm kind of curious, and I'm going to kind of take a right turn on the conversation, but from a schooling standpoint, wanting to learn about such a hands-on profession and having to do it remotely, can you give people at home a sense of if that was just kind of a choose your own adventure, have to figure it out sort of scenario based on that?
Kind of, pretty much, because nobody really knew what they were doing because nobody had seen a pandemic before. I mean, the last one was 1918 with the Spanish flu, so nobody really knew what to do when it came to, Zoom chats, and there's this thing called Blackboard that we used. But I think my professor did an amazing job, and I was able to come back to the classroom or the TV studio in the fall of 2020 and through spring 2021 when I just graduated. And I got to give a major plug to Kevin Ankeny, who runs this amazing program up at SUNY Adirondack. And he, even through the pandemic and up until recently, such a great guy and such an informed guy. And, any listeners out there that are trying to get involved in a career in radio, television, broadcasting, or broadcast media or journalism, whatever it may be, highly recommend it, especially if you're in the New York area. So, yeah, I mean, it was difficult, not going to lie, with scripts and all this other stuff, but, we made it through. That's what matters.
Exactly. It's not necessarily, the route you take getting there is important, but you got from point A to point B. It wasn't necessarily the way you drew it up, but you wound up learning a lot of really cool stuff, and you wound up being able to apply that knowledge into something that a lot of people have really enjoyed and something that's very, very well done. And that's not easy to do. So I'm not wearing a hat, but if I was, hats off, whatever. Although I got to tell you, my head's a little weirdly shaped. So if I tried to wear a hat, it wouldn't necessarily go well. Maybe JD has a chapeau he can, put on and take off.
Let's see.
He does. Of course he does.
How about the greatest horse to ever live?
That's arguable. JD.
Thank you. Thank you.
I only did that to irritate Andrew.
No, it's okay.
Me, apparently, too, JD.
No, if you were going to irritate me, you'd have said something like, hey, Andrew, you were right about Ron Bauer winning the Belmont.
I guess I should have just went Godolphin, and we all would have been happy.
I respect Godolphin.
Because it's not like Godolphin has any major issues going on right now, right? Enjoy that awkward pause, JD. You earned it. You earned it, buddy. Right now.
Right, well, speaking of getting from point A to point B, let's get this podcast back on track and touch on one of the reasons why we want to have Joe on is obviously we've now got two New York guys, so of course we're going to talk about Naira.
Do you have your thin crust pizza handy, Joe? Mine's right off screen.
Yeah, so is mine. It's right over here.
Cool. Awesome. Fantastic. Yeah, so we're headed now to Belmont Park for Saturday's Late Pick 4. This Late Pick 4 sequence is fantastic. Huge fields. One reminder, as mentioned before we get started, there is rain in the forecast, so adjust your handicapping accordingly. If scratches happen, if races come off the turf, JD's ticket will highlight these, and he'll go into a little bit more depth. Joe and I, however, are incredibly optimistic that things will wind up going off without a hitch because, hey, on a serious note, horse players are some of the most optimistic people that you'll ever meet in your life because A, if you pick 3 winners out of 10, you're doing really well. And B, you've got to be optimistic to keep coming back after some of the bad beats horse players get on a daily basis. So it's certainly a case where we're hoping for the best, and we'll hope for the best in a lot of different ways as we dive into race number 7. Race number 7 of 10 is the opening leg of this Late Pick 4 sequence. It's a maiden special weight event for older fillies and mares going 6 furlongs on the turf course. And if you think that field looks incomplete, well, that's because it is. And we've got a number of runners on the second page here as JD goes through. But we'll leave this up for just a moment here. And Bitten by Kitten is the 7-2 morning line favorite.
This is the field as it sits today, are these 10 runners. So when we go to the next page here, these are a combination of also eligibles and MTOs. So sometimes you get in New York that the MTOs are drawn, with a field number, regularly in the field. This is a case where it isn't. So 11, 12, and 13 are also eligibles. 14, 15, and 16 are MTOs. So if one horse comes out, we'll probably have a new favorite because Quick Conversation, given a 5-2 morning line, is on the also eligible list and will probably want to stay on turf and wouldn't go if this race goes to the dirt. So just something to keep in mind as we head to our selection. So Andrew, mine is the most complicated. I want to save my leg one ticket for the end. Why don't you kick us off here?
Okay, sure. So I'm going 3 deep in here. I'm using a couple of the logical horses. Number 4, Cease and Desist, debuted at Saratoga in an off-the-turf race. I'm throwing that one out completely. Was 5th of 10. The winner freaked that day. It was an off-the-turf situation with a fast main track. That's not what this horse wants to do. This is a turf horse that's been working up at Saratoga pretty steadily for Chad. Gets Javier Castellano, I think, is one you have to use. Bitten by Kitten is the morning line favorite as far as the body of the race is concerned. This would be my top selection. Bitten by Kitten went 1 mile and a 16th to start things off at Keeneland. Wesley Ward does not train horses to go 1 mile and a 16th first time out. Have to think they just ran in that race to give the horse a race, and she still ran third. She was beaten 3 lengths. She was up near the front. Joel Rosario slated to ride this one, and I think she will benefit from the cutback in distance. However, this sequence's pedigree play for me comes in the form of number 2, Dame Time. You see in a mischief at the top, that's a good thing, but that's not necessarily what gets my blood going. If you look at the bottom of that pedigree, you go back a couple of generations, you see a horse that you're not going to see a lot of in pedigrees because for as freakishly good as he was on the racetrack, Lure was a big disappointment at stud. He had all of those fertility issues. He, I believe, had less than 100 progeny that were named, so not exactly a prominent name in bloodlines, but I see the breeding on this one. I see steady works. I see a 20% trainer. I see double-digit odds. Yeah, I need to use Dame Time. I'm thinking maybe that horse is sitting on a big race first time out. Michelle Nevin's runners sometimes need a race or two to get going, but the barn's hit at 11% with first-time starters of late. It's not like that would be a total shock. 249 for me in race number 7 at Belmont. If any of those scratch and it stays on the turf, yeah, you probably need to use Quick Conversation. But even so, I'm not as overly sold on that one as I probably should be, simply because Belmont's turf course of late has played like a conveyor belt, and I don't like closers as much. So, yeah, you might need to use the horse, but maybe use the horse as a B if you're doing a grid system. So those are my thoughts on the race. Joe, your thoughts?
A tricky race, guys, not going to lie. That's why I went 4 deep in this one. A lot of first-time starters, including that Dame Time that you were discussing earlier, Michelle Nevin, a very underrated trainer on the New York circuit, and gets Manny Franco. As you said, the pedigree stands for itself. Lure, obviously not the greatest of sires, but a tough turf horse nonetheless. And then, of course, you have evoking the number 3 for Jonathan Thomas. Luis Saez gets the call. 2 bullet works in his last 2 works. And Jonathan Thomas, you got to just look back a few years with Catholic Boy. He knows how to train a turf horse. And, of course, Chad Brown comes in with Cease and Desist with Javier Castellano in the irons. And as you said, Andrew, a must-use here for Claravit Stables. And, of course, my last runner, Bitten by Kitten, your favorite as we stand, Wesley Ward, Joel Rosario, second time out since April 11th at Keeneland. The money speaks for itself. Kitten's Joy, you can't really go wrong with Bitten by Kitten.
So now we head into the Twilight Zone. JD, take it away.
All right. So I've got 6 horses listed here. We've got 3 that are in the field proper, the 6, the 8, and the 9. We have an also eligible in the 11, and we have 2 MTOs to throw on the 14 and the 16 to talk about. I'm actually going to talk about none of my horses first, because the one thing I was surprised you guys didn't mention, so Cease and Desist, I think the big draw on the 4 is that's a half sister to Another Twist of Fate. And if you look at that bloodline, I don't know why they're trying a sprint again, other than to get the horse some condition for a route next time out. So I am tossing the 4 just because I think this distance is not enough, going 6 furlongs on the inner turf. My top selection is the 9 Bitten by Kitten, but I wanted to throw out a first-time starter that interests me a little bit, Blue Times, by Not This Time, out of Crafty Shaw mare, Crafty Blue Cat. There's turf up and down on that pedigree, and some turf sprint background, and my guy Kendrick Carmouche gets the call first time up for Danny Gargan. So interesting horse, 12-1 on the morning line. And then I also want to touch on the 8 Back Channel real quick, trying turf for the first time, and you really look at this horse's pedigree and you wonder why. It's one of these situations. This will be the 8th start of the career for her. You read the pedigree and you think turf, but obviously there was some reason why previous trainers didn't try this, including Chad Brown. Now, Chad Brown had this horse when there was not turf racing available in New York, obviously, but just interesting to look back that Linda Rice and Chad Brown both had this horse and did not try turf. Now, Rudy Rod, second time up, will try turf. I think Back Channel is going to be sneaky at 6-1. Quick conversation. Again, 2 strong efforts. You mentioned a closer by trade, Andrew, and those had not been winning on the inner turf at Belmont, but this horse was as close to anybody I've seen do it, only beaten a half length there on May 1st. And the 2 MTOs, the 14 Mun Love, talking about cease and desist, Mun Love was ahead of cease and desist in her only start of her career so far. Obviously, Mun Love now making 8 starts, as that was a long, long time ago back at Saratoga, but definitely runs better on the dirt, but has some strong turf performances as well, should be in condition and should be ready to go for the daughter of Munnings. And then 16 Sand and Sea, Belmont first-time starter, looks to be really well met for the dirt, and very interesting Indiana bred. We'll get Junior Alvarado up if drawn into the field. So I am 6 deep here, technically 6, 8, 9, 11, 14, 16. Do not expect all of them on. And Andrew's wearing his Indiana Grand shirt, which is why
Indiana bred.
Yes, I did.
Yes. Free shirts are always fun. Thank you very much, Rachel McLaughlin. Really appreciate that. Moving on to race number 8, and this for me is an allowance optional claiming event that may as well be an overnight stakes race. These are some really good horses signed on. Mystic Knight, horse number 9 in your program, is the 3-1 morning line favorite. But if you look at this morning line, first of all, before we get too far into it, I've got a bold prediction. That bold prediction is there's no way Chestertown is going to be 10-1. That horse always gets bet for a variety of reasons. I don't like the horse at all. I think he's going to be 5-1 or 6-1. And maybe, just maybe, that sets up a situation where we get an overlaid price on a couple of horses that I feel do have a chance in this particular spot. JD, you want me to go first?
Go for it.
All right. So, yeah, it's probably going to rain. And I do think there's going to be some moisture in the track. And I think that sets up perfectly for number 5, Creed. I don't know if it's Apollo or Adonis, but either way, I think Creed has a big-time puncher's chance in this race, especially if the track is wet. This is the type of wordplay that you've come to expect from Champagne and JD over the past year.
It's not Scott Staff?
No. My arms are not wide open, and I am not looking for this horse to take me higher. Putting aside and wordplay aside, as everybody stops groaning now, back on June 11th of last year, Creed freaked in a track, over a muddy track, earned an 89 Beyer speed figure and won by nearly 8 lengths. I'm not necessarily quite sure what he beat that day, but he came right back. He won his next start on July 2nd at Belmont, and then he went away for a while. Then he comes back at Gulfstream, runs a better than it looked fourth going 6 furlongs in a race that may as well have had a big neon sign saying, I need a race all over it. Comes up to Belmont, and I got to tell you, I'm not quite sure what happened last time out. I know the Beyer speed figure is pretty consistent, but I just think the horse bounced. I think that a bounce back effort is in the cards in this spot. I think he will certainly improve if the track comes up wet. Now, Mystic Knight does come in off of a 99 Beyer speed figure. I do think you need to use this horse, but I'm taking these Aqueduct figures with a grain of salt. You don't necessarily know what you're going to get. That track is always quirky, and it seemed like it was extra quirky this past winter and spring. JD, keep that smile off your face, because I know you benefited from that quirkiness just as much as anybody else. I'll also use a couple of bigger prices drawn to the inside. Number 2, Girolamo's Attack. May get a little bit of support at the windows, but I still think you'll get 6-8 to 1 on this horse. Ran big last time out at Gulfstream. Faces a better field, but Safi Joseph's horses have been running so far at this Belmont meet. Need to throw him in. And speaking of trainer moves, you can't get much of a better trainer move than first-time Rob Atras, and that's the case with number 1, Extraordinary Jerry. His last 2 races were terrible. Absolutely god-awful. Not sure what happened, but Rob Atras is very, very good with new acquisitions, and you look back at those 2019 races, they're pretty darn good. Needed to throw him on the ticket, if for no other reason than if he runs back to those races, wins at, say, 12 or 13 to 1, and I don't have him, I will be very, very upset. 1, 2, 5, and 9 for me. Creed, my top selection. Did see fit to use a couple of others, though.
Extraordinary Jerry is my top selection in this race, Andrew, and you cannot get a better angle than what you just said. First time Rob Atras, signed me up for that. 7 ways to Sunday. Again, was terrible at Churchill, but was off the long layoff, kind of, switch barns, was great for Pletcher. The run back, I mean, this is going to sound crazy, but the run back August 25th, 2019, similar condition at Saratoga, won by 7, probably beats this field by 11. So if we get that Extraordinary Jerry, and the works have been good, this horse could just demolish this field. The other interesting runner I want to touch on, as I have the first 4 inside runners, is the 3 Superfecto. Superfecto has tried so hard to get on the lead and has just faced slightly speedier horses, especially in the last attempt in the Ghost Sapper down at Gulfstream Park. I mean, those are some hot fractions up front, didn't get the lead and faded, still ran a good third to Eye of the Jedi. I do think this might be an opportunity to get a loose lead, and if not, it's going to be lost in Rome, kind of tracking the 4, tracking the 3. So I'm going the first 4 runners. I think all of them are going to be pretty close to the pace. I think all of them are going to be the first 4, and I just think they're going to distance themselves from the rest of this field going a mile and a 16th. So 1, 2, 3, 4 in leg 2 for me, and I wanted to give some counterbalance because I think myself and Joe see this race entirely differently.
That is correct. So for me, guys, Extraordinary Jerry, just looking at his PPs at the moment, his last 2 races absolutely terrible at Churchill, both starts. But who knows, guys? His race on May 23rd in the Blame at Churchill last May, he faced Owendale, Everfast, and Silver Dust, some quality horses there. But again, who knows? When it comes to this race, I go 3 deep. Creed, Andrew touched on quite a bit there. So his last 2 races have not been too great, but he's 2 for 3 at Belmont Park. So that's a little upside by honor code. Shug McGay, he trains. I mean, you can't really go wrong there. Doubly Blessed, Michael Maker, Empire Maker, the Sire, 3 Diamonds Farm. Looks like he might get a nice stalking trip just outside the pace. And, of course, the 9, not using Chestertown here, but the 9 Mystic Knight, obviously. Chad Brown, here he is again, wins the allowance race at Aqueduct on March 14th, and a deserved favorite without a doubt. So 5, 7, 9 for me in the 8th race.
So we got a lot of ground covered in the second leg of this pick 4 sequence. We'll move on now to the third leg. This is the Saturday feature. It is the Grade 2 Pennine Ridge Stakes for 3-year-olds going a mile and an eighth. It is the local prep for the Grade 1 Belmont Derby. And we've got a pretty darn good field of 9 that is led by 9-5 favorite Hard Love, horse number 4 in your program. JD mentioned this. If it rains, they're going to try to save the turf course. But you have to think they're going to do everything they can to keep this one on the grass. They've got a couple of horses in here that you've probably heard of if you've been following the game. Sainthood last ran in the Kentucky Derby. Public Sector ran in the Breeders' Cup. We're going to talk about him a pretty fair bit in here. But starting things off here, I'm going 3 deep. Hard Love to me hits me as a horse that could well sit a Dream Trip and may just be better than this group. But I'm looking at this and I'm seeing, okay, yes, this horse broke the maiden at Belmont. I don't think he beat anything that day. Ran a good second in the Central Park behind a horse and Never Surprised. Came back running off the bench to win a similar stakes race and now tries Graded Company for the first time. He certainly is a candidate to sit the trip. But I'm going to go with a little bit of a price on top in the form of number 2 Step Dancer, who is 10-1 on the program, but I think is going to come down a little bit. I think we're going to get 6-7-1. And he's my top pick, even though I'm not crazy about closers on this turf course. I thought the race he ran last time out was very, very good. He was not supposed to rally and make up that much ground into very slow early fractions, running 8 wide in a field of 8. Javier, what the heck were you doing? But Step Dancer gets Manny Franco for this one. Barkley tagged the trainer, and if that combination sounds familiar, they teamed up on a little horse named Tiz the Law last year, and Tiz the Law wound up doing a lot of really cool things. But Step Dancer has shown an ability to run well on off turf. He broke his maiden at Saratoga, rallying from 9th, winning going away by 3.5, and then a couple starts later, he won the Awad Stakes over this very turf course, rallying into a very slow early pace. I think Step Dancer is a very, very good horse, and I'll be very happy if we get 10-1. The other horse that I think you need to use, in addition to those two, is Sainthood, who tries turf for the first time. He did, however, try a synthetic track 2 starts back in the Jeff Ruby Stakes at Turfway. Ran second that day. A lot was made of the trip. It was a horrible trip. He ran in the Kentucky Derby, and it's not like he ran terribly. He was just sort of one-paced. If nothing else, there are a lot of horses in here that are stretching out from a mile or a mile and a 16th to a mile and an 1/8. If nothing else, the distance isn't going to get Sainthood beat. He has a pedigree that's very turf heavy by M. Shawish out of a Lemon Drop Kidmare. I think this is a really good spot. Joel Rosario sees fit to ride for Pletcher. He's probably going to be the wise guy horse in here. If Hard Love goes off favored, I think he'll be 5-2. I don't think Sainthood is going to be too far behind that one. I think that one may well be your second choice. Certainly no worse than third choice. But for me, 2, 4, 5. In the Pennine Ridge. JD, where are we going next?
I want to hear from Joe here, who's got 2 of your 3 horses.
Yeah, I mean, I think Hard Love is going to be tough to beat. Jonathan Thomas last out won the Woodhaven, hasn't been out in close to a month, but still, I mean, he ran a nice race there. Javier Castellano aboard and returns today. And Sainthood, as you guys said, I mean, he didn't run the worst race in the Kentucky Derby, and 2 back. I really enjoyed the trip in the Jeff Ruby Stakes. Not the greatest of trips, but he made up a ton of ground, and I think that's very convincing, especially on the synthetic. A lot of horses don't mind the transition from synthetic to turf. And, of course, my last of the 3, Public Sector for Chad Brown, Clarvard Stables. Ran second in that optional claiming last out. Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf ran 12th. A little disappointing, but I think he gets back on the right track in the Pennine Ridge.
All right. You mentioned Public Sector, and this is where I need to jump in because I was all in on Public Sector ahead of his debut at Saratoga. I thought he was the best 2-year-old on the grounds at Saratoga last year. The way he was training with that pedigree. You look at the Turf Tomlinson number on this horse. You don't see a 465 Turf Tomlinson ever. You see a 350, you see a 360, whatever. You don't see that kind of pedigree. He won the debut. He was 2-1 that day. He should have been 1-5. He runs in the Pilgrim. He's 1 pace behind a slow pace. Runs in the Juvenile Turf. Something goes wrong. He comes back at Belmont against a field he should have beaten. Maybe he needed the race, but I thought first time Lasix, the progression from 2 to 3, he's supposed to win that race. I'm off the Public Sector bandwagon, but my seat is not empty. Take it away, JD.
I look at it this way, Andrew. Public Sector has not gotten a pace to run in the entire career. The maiden race was just the superior animal that day. Pilgrim, very, very slow fraction, still ran well. Juvenile Turf, didn't like getting jostled around at the beginning. You can make some excuses there. And then last time out, that was just such a slow, easy pace. Just nothing to run into. First off the layoff, I'm willing to excuse it. I think this is going to be the race with the pace. I think Shaftesbury is going to go like a rocket up front. I think Sainthood is going to follow. I think these two are going to set very hot fractions, and I think they set up for the closers in this spot. And I still think Public Sector, we haven't seen the best of Public Sector, and I'm willing to take the chance. 9-2 morning line. I don't think we're going to get 9-2. I think we're going to get 7-2, 3-1 on just based on the connections with Chad Brown. But I think really interesting that Arad is not on this horse. We've got Jose Ortiz this time. And really, I think it's a case where Irad, maybe with how slow that pace was last time out, should have just took this horse to the lead because this was the best horse in the race and just didn't let the race, let the race dictate when probably shouldn't, given the field it was against. So I'm willing to take the chance on Public Sector, and I think it's a chance. So I think in this case, I either needed to take a lot of horses or I needed a single, and I'm going to take the stand on Public Sector. So my single in leg 3, race number 9 in this pick 4 sequence.
And I want it known I am off the Public Sector bandwagon, which is as good an indication as any to go to the windows the second you see, 9-2.
Pour the money in.
Yeah. Both fists. We're talking Mattress Mac at the Derby type, like you need security guards to guard all of the cash. Now, after I get knocked out at this pick 4 by the horse that I have loved for almost a year, we're going to move on to the Saturday nightcap. This is race number 10. It's a claiming event for older fillies and mares going 1 1/16 on the turf course. This is another race where we've got some also eligibles, where we've got some horses on the MTO list. It's a case where, again, we've got 2 pages worth of entries, and your favorite on the morning line is an entry with one horse that is on the MTO list, and you get a couple of other pages of horses that may well be contenders if this race gets moved to the main track. So, JD, you want me to finish things off here by starting, I guess?
You've been leading off. You might as well just keep going.
I'm just asking. You're the one driving the train. I don't want to be out of order. So I am going to use the entry in here, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name of horse number 1. Fine, I will. Sengik Tackett. I really hope I'm saying that right, but for now, I'll just call it the one horse. The one horse broke the maiden 2 starts back, first off the claim for Danny Gargan. That's another really good move. Danny Gargan's one of the best in the game, first off the claim. Then tries Starter Allowance Company. Those Starter Allowance races at Gulfstream, they're not easy. And this horse was just in far over her head at that point. Comes up north, now faces 30,000 non-winners of 2 life claimers. Big drop in class, and I think the one horse is certainly the one that will take some betting for sure. Now, the other one that I'm using is Gray Destiny, horse number 9 in your program, and this is a really curious case where I'm looking at this horse and going, why is she in for 30? This is a runner that as a 2-year-old showed a lot of talent first time out. Yes, it was an off-the-turf race at Belmont, but rallied from 7th, 6 lengths back at the first point of call, won by nearly 5 lengths. First-time starter going 1 1/16, rating like that and coming with that kind of move, not easy to do. So they sort of had to keep her on the dirt for a $250,000 New York bred race. And if you're not educated on the New York Stallion Series program, seriously brush up on it because they offer a lot, and I mean a lot of money. I cannot fault these connections for taking the shot that they did. And she was 7-2 that day. It wasn't like they were just taking a flyer because they had a New York bred that was, that had won first time out. She had a legit shot. Well, something goes wrong that day. You have to think. Because she's 7th, beaten 26.5 lengths. She's been off since then. She comes back for a $30,000 tag. I don't know why. It baffles me. There is every chance in the world that they're just trying to dump the horse. But, big but here, if they're playing the game, if they're trying to see, okay, can we sneak this one by and become eligible for those starter allowance races at Saratoga this summer, then there's every chance that Gray Destiny is sitting on a big race. The kind of race that the connections thought she would be giving first time out if that race had been on the turf. So I needed to use her here. I'm not crazy about doubling up in a spot like this and not having a single on a $36 ticket. I'm sure the ticket police on Twitter, as ever rational as they are, will come jumping down my throat. But, big but here, when I play, I will be giving out a grid structured ticket. It's just this system here and grids, it's a lot of small numbers and it's a lot of math, and I was told there would be no math. So you're going to need to follow me on Twitter. I'll have the grid there, and that'll be a smaller investment. It'll be somewhere in the 20s. I'll be leaning on my stronger opinions a little bit more, so keep an eye out for that. But for now, if you're playing a caveman style ticket, this is the one for me here. It's a $36 play. Here's hoping everything stays on the turf.
And I, again, have a very complex set of runners to talk about. So, Joe, why don't you take your ticket home here?
Yeah, I mean, I only have two in this last leg. Moana's Tail, Belmont, Junior Alvarado. You see these connections very often, have a lot of success. And what really stuck out about this horse for me, last start, not the best, 6 by 8 1/4 lengths, but the second start back, allowance 72, 2 back, ran 3rd by 5. And I also want to point you guys in the direction of this. The last two workouts, 4 furlongs, 48-1, and then the one before that, the same, 48-1. Some solid workouts from Moana's Tail, and I think she might, make a little fun out of this race. And Great Destiny, as you said, Andrew. Christophe Clement, Jose Lezcano gets the call. And it's a little confusing because, as you said, very talented debut. Again, off the turf, but still, won by almost 5 lengths. New York Stallion Series, 7-2, as you said, 7th by 26. And is there a chance that they're going to try to dump this horse? Very true. But first time Lasix, and I think if this horse brings back any of that talent on Saturday's card, we'll all be in good shape. So Great Destiny and also Moana's Tail for my last leg of this late pick 4 for Saturday's card at Belmont Park.
All right, now JD, we're going back into the twilight zone here. I'm not going to do the Rod Serling voice with the intro, but you get the idea.
All right, so if this stays on the turf, 1, 3, 4. I think they're the 3 quickest of the horses. I think they'll be out near the lead kiss and runs. My top selection, just coming off of a $40,000 maiden claiming score on this very course, going the same mile and a 16th difference. Had Manny Franco up that day. Gets Irad Ortiz Jr. Don't know if you guys have heard of him this time around. So I tend to like Irad on the lead for reasons that I don't really like to talk about on the podcast, but there are good reasons.
Don't get fired, JD. Don't get fired.
And Freddie Mo Factor, I think, can sit a similar trip coming up from Gulfstream Park. Has been in lower level claiming than what we see here, but probably Gulfstream 20s and Belmont 30s. There's not a whole lot of difference in terms of class there. So I think this can be a very competitive horse who's hung a little bit, 3 straight seconds, including a neck and a head. And Andrew obviously doesn't have a hanger close by, so I dodged a bullet today.
Why? Oh.
Okay, there we go. And then if we
that
go,
was your own fault.
I know. If we go off the turf, the MTOs in this race are the 8 Carrick, the 12 Sweeter, the 13 Make or Break, and the 14th Amity Island. I want to touch on the 12 Sweeter a little bit, who just broke the maiden in maiden 25, going 6.5 at Belmont here on May 8th.
I needed Obla D that day. I needed Obla D very badly. That one hurt.
This was one of the more incredible rides of Joel Rosario's career, and I know that sounds crazy given the career that he's had.
It's not wrong.
Not at all.
This horse, I'm still amazed that this horse finished the race, let alone won the race based on, I think, based on the jostling and moving in and steadied and everything. I thought Joel was going to fall off twice probably in the course of the race. Somehow kept it together at the calls, was 9.5 back, 13 lengths back, 10 lengths back, and then all of a sudden, wins by a half. Go and watch that replay And if
Or
this,
don't, if you have Obla D that day and you don't like being triggered, just fair warning, it's brutal.
And that's big too, considering Orb and Blind Luck on Joel Rosario's resume. I mean, who would have thought that this little race on May 8th at Belmont Park, maiden claiming 25, would have been one of his best rides?
Yeah. That's for darn sure, as I drop my hanger and make a whole bunch of noise. But you mentioned Blind Luck, and I got to do a quick tangent here. Blind Luck, the worst looking horse I have ever seen in a paddock, ever, without fail. I was at Saratoga for the Alabama when she won it. She's underneath the cover. She's not out in the sun circling there. She's underneath cover. They're trying to hide her. And I'm walking by and I'm going, wait, what the heck is that? She's completely washed out. She looks totally disinterested. Keep that in mind. Pause this, open a new browser tab, watch the Alabama, and watch the last 4 furlongs. One of the most amazing things I've ever seen.
Remarkable.
So $60 ticket here with a whole bunch of asterisks, because this will likely actually be more of my style. This is probably going to wind up either being a $12 or an $18 ticket, depending on the MTOs. It says $60. I talked about all these horses, but this ticket, this will not actually exist on Saturday. So follow on social media. We'll get you the right numbers. But again, $60 total today as it lays, probably an $18 ticket when all is said and done.
Mine's going to be $36, and Joe's, we'll see. Hopefully, for our sake, everything stays on the turf, because if it does stay on the turf, it's a really good card on Saturday at Belmont Park. And I know a lot of people are saving up for the Belmont Stakes Day card a week from Saturday for good reason, because that card is one of the best cards of the year. But do yourself a favor, if you've got some time, take a look at this card. It's really good. Here's hoping Mother Nature cooperates. Now, we move on to our final thoughts segment, and this is a segment where, to kick things off, we will bequeath the floor to our guest, Joe, who can basically talk about whatever the heck he wants to talk about and use this to plug anything he wants to plug, discuss anything that's on his mind. Joe, floor is yours, buddy.
Well, I'm excited about the last leg of the Triple Crown in just about a week or so, the Belmont Stakes. A lot of exciting racing to be had, as well as Saratoga opening to the majority of fans, almost full capacity, and just doing Shedrow Stories and the Amplify Horse Racing podcast. All the good stuff coming up, and I'm so excited to be a part of this racing community. It's honestly the best.
It's there's a lot of fun things that are going on. I mean,
no doubt.
Just throwing it out here.
There it is.
Saratoga, I'm always going to smile. I worked in that little area right there for a couple of years. No office beats the press box at Saratoga. Nothing comes close. It just doesn't. JD, do you want me to go with my final thought, or would you like to go? You're pointing to yourself. You're doing the Rob Van Dam thing, so go right ahead.
All right. You guys know me. I cannot get away without giving you a pick from Australia. Queensland Derby, Group 1, taking place at Eagle Farm on Friday night in the U.S., Saturday down in Australia. And I'm going to lead you towards the 3-horse Cucaracha, who obviously was disappointing last time out in the Rough Habit at Doomben, finishing second behind Criminal Defense. But this horse is revved and ready to go. I think very much will sit the trip behind the early speed, and you get James McDonald and Chris Waller. You can't go wrong there. Really, Explosive Jack's going to be the heavy favorite. The one thing that these two horses share, these are Kiwi breds going against the Aussies, both Explosive Jack and Cucaracha, bred in New Zealand, and will go against the Australians. But a big card at Eagle Farm. And I know Michael Rona's got some great work already out on the card if you want a North American spin on it. And I know he'll be doing some coverage while he's calling the races at Losail, because he's a crazy man that loves Australian racing and quarter horse racing at the same time, and will give you his picks on both simultaneously. So look forward to that and watch on Sky Racing World and TVG on Friday night.
So I got to tell you, when you said Rough Habit, I initially thought you said Run Happy, and I'm going, he's spending money down there too?
No.
Rough Habit. It sounds sort of similar. I'm just saying. Thrown out.
Okay, sure.
All right.
Andrew, what are your final thoughts?
So I've got two. The first is a good one. Friday's late pick 5 at Pimlico. really, really good. There is a 6-figure carryover going into this sequence. So if you've got some time, we're recording this on Thursday night. So if you've got a slow Friday at the office or you're up late on a Thursday night, take a look at some of these races. I've got a pick in one of them up over on the Daily Racing Forums YouTube channel. My spot play comes in leg number 3, race number 7. I like a 4-to-1 shot in there a fair bit, possibly enough to single, but I'll be sending out my tickets after I do a little bit of construction this evening. All right. JD, what's my streak of having positive final thoughts?
Well, can I add a negative to your previous thought first, and then
Sure.
do it? 94% chance of rain tomorrow in Baltimore. All right.
As long as we're able to, acknowledge that my pick is in a dirt race, so we're okay.
Okay.
All right. So what's my?
I believe 4 straight.
You're going to need to reset it.
Okay.
Monmouth Park opens on Friday. I like Monmouth Park. I have been to Monmouth Park a number of times. Joe, we were talking before the show. Kidding aside, we're from literally about 20 miles away from each other. It's really freaking eerie. I've been to Monmouth Park a couple of times. Nice people, nice racetrack. They're doing what they can. Having said that, we'd be remiss if we did not talk about the effects of the whip rule. Now, I am not a jockey. The only person my size that has ever looked good on a horse is John Wayne, okay? Just throwing that out there right now. The problem is, if you're not a jockey, you shouldn't be making the rules about what jockeys can and cannot do. I'm just throwing that out there. Now, there are people in the industry that have said something along the lines, and this is a very politically correct version, and I applaud whoever came up with the company line of, yes, we understand there's a whip rule. We understand it's controversial, but there are a lot of people on the backsides at Monmouth Park and in the racing offices that are busting their butts. That's true, and I really hope that they have a more successful meet than I think they're going to have. Having said that, at this point, we need to acknowledge that there's a problem in the room, and we need to do something to fix it. There's a lot of acknowledging the problem in the room. What are we doing to fix it? I don't think we're doing a lot. And that's got to change. Now, I don't know if that's the New Jersey Racing Commission. I don't know if that's people up on high. This is a problem that's not going to go away. And I really hope we don't fall into the same trap racing sometimes falls into when it comes to crisis management of rolling into a ball and waiting for people to look elsewhere. Please do something. Monmouth is too nice and too beautiful and too historic to be brought down by something as arcane as this. I could have gone a lot more negative. I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to be rolling out the red carpet in the Jersey Shore anytime soon.
They don't have red carpets in New Jersey. They boo the people they like in New Jersey. I say that. I love New Jersey. Been there a bunch. I have a picture on my Venmo account of King Kong Bundy choking a young Andrew at an NWA Jersey show in Wildwood on the pier. It's there. Trust me. Find me.
I'm reminded
a couple of bucks.
I'm reminded of the Bloodhound Gang song, The 10 Best Things About New Jersey, which is 10 Seconds of Silence. It's a great track.
Jersey gets a bad rap. It's easy to, blame the state for a lot, like Enzo Amore and whatnot. But you know what New Jersey did give us? Mike Trout. I will be seeing the Angels on Friday and Saturday night here at the Oakland Coliseum. Unfortunately, Mike Trout nursing an injury. But right before we came on the air, talk about your weird stories. Shohei Ohtani was supposed to pitch tonight. He got stuck in traffic on the way to the ball game. Could not warm up. So he'll be pitching tomorrow when friend of the program, Matt Dinnerman, and I are in attendance. You can't make this stuff up.
Matt better bring some ducks to the ballpark. That's all I'm saying.
I don't know. All I know is I'm paying his way in and I'm buying him dinner to pay off that daily Gallup bet. So I hope he's happy. And on that note, that sounds like a really good place to call it.
Great place to wrap.
Yeah. Joe, really quick before we sign off, where can people follow you on social media? Plug anything you want to plug before we go out the door here.
Joe Mason 150. It's in this bottom corner, trying to navigate. There it is. Yeah, Joe Mason 150 on Twitter and on Instagram. So, and just keep following Shedrow Stories, the Amplify horse racing podcast. We do it when we can, and yeah, just doing my part, guys. Just doing my part.
And we're proud of that. We're happy to have you on. This guy, Joe Mason's going to do a lot of really good things in this sport. Joe, thank you so much for taking the time. We appreciate it, buddy.
Pleasure, guys. Pleasure.
For JD Fox, I am Andrew Champagne. Best of luck this weekend. Have a very happy and safe Memorial Day. Enjoy the time you spent with your loved ones. And JD, since I think I've gotten us in enough trouble this week, would you like to take us home with the catchphrase?
With the clarification that this catchphrase has nothing to do with the Jersey Shore, Atlantic City, anything related to it. Stay off the beaches.
Have a good weekend, everybody.